Hi, this is Karen, and I'm welcoming you to my YouTube channel. If you're new, I want to tell you a little bit about me and what I do, but right now I'm sitting on the shores of absolutely beautiful Lake Superior in Duluth, Minnesota. And from the time I left California, born and raised 42 years, I moved up to northeastern Minnesota, and I thought, gosh, I really miss the ocean. But I found this huge body of water here at Lake Superior. And although she's cold mother to me, she's a beautiful place that I respect, and she's also one that has taught me a great deal. From the time that I moved up here, I opened up a little business. I had worked as a senior family law paralegal, and I did that for almost 18 years at Judges Chambers and one firm for 10 years in San Jose on the Alameda, and also at the DA's office in Merced, California. So I developed a real clear professional sense about helping other people and interviewing in the family law arena. When I got to Minnesota, I had been gathering lots of skills that I wanted to gather just out of a want to help people. My dad had a bad back, several people had migraines and problems, and I had gone to massage school, I had become an herbalist, and these were all things I did with my legal paycheck, and I did it just because I wanted to. Well, I got up to Minnesota July 1st of 2002, began to look for a job to get started in a whole new place with a 6-year-old son, he was almost 7, as a solo mom. I didn't really know anyone besides my mother had also left California and moved up here. And I found that I could get myself a couple of jobs in law firms, but they just weren't the same as where I'd worked before. I had a lot of empowerment and respect. I made okay money, but when I got up here I thought, you know, I'm just not going to be happy doing this, and I'd really like to have my own business. I'd worked really hard obtaining those skills. And when clients started coming in the door, I found that a lot of people, when they filled out their massage therapy client information sheet, they were indicating that a lot of them were taking Synthroid and levothyroxine. Those are synthetic thyroid hormone drugs. And I thought, well, what is it about Minnesota that makes it so many people have thyroid issues? This is now 2003, when I opened my business February 1st of 2003. And I got myself licensed, had a full background check with the FBI, and of course I passed because of having a high-level clearance for the DA previously. And my name had to be passed around the city where I got my business license, and I still am right now. And so I opened and I started really tenderly caring for people. With all of the skills that I had gathered in my medicine bag, I became something that was way more than a massage therapist. I became a confidant. People shared very, very intimate stories with me, and I cared about them as if they were my own family. Not because I was just a business, but because I was really genuinely what some people would call a medicine woman. And in the world today, back in 2003 until today, 2017, there just aren't really many of us left anymore. What I watched from the early 1960s growing up in San Jose, California, was that a lot of people were turning to just pharmaceutical drugs and surgeries. They were turning to chemotherapy and radiation. But I'd been raised by my mother, who was born in 1942, and my grandmother, who was born in 1918 in Minnesota, and both of them were very reluctant to go and use Western allopathic doctoring. In fact, my mother probably has never had a mammogram, and my grandmother, who passed away in 2010, I'm sure never had one herself. So it was a very, very rare event that they ever went to see the doctor. Along my path of helping these clients and adjusting to the really long and cold Minnesota winters that were really different from Santa Cruz, California, and helping people that were on these different drugs for their thyroid, I began to see so many people who were taking these drugs that I thought, something must really be up in Minnesota that's causing this to happen. At first, the first thing that I would scratch my head and think to myself, and I thought, it must be the long winters. It must be that people are really deficient in vitamin D. And, you know, maybe it's because I can see that they get a depression around September every year. Oh gosh, the long winter's coming. The people that did the quilting and the scrapbooking, and, you know, that they had plenty of money to take vacations, which I didn't. They could busy their winters and they had things to look forward to, but for those of us that didn't really have that as an option, at least I didn't in the beginning of my business, it was a really tedious winter. They're very, very long, they're very brutal, and your skin and your hair dries out a great deal. I was sure that that had everything to do with why their thyroids were misfunctioning. I kept looking and looking, and as I was reading through the books to learn about what was happening with them, just like I had as a therapeutic foster parent with FASD, fetal alcohol spectrum disease or disorder, I started looking into the thyroid books. I read Dr. Shames, I read Dr. Brownstein, you know, I read everybody's thyroid book. I wanted to just figure out what it was. And lo and behold, I saw myself in it. I saw that I too had started to manifest a lot of anxiety, some depression. I was talking really fast, and I began to observe a lot of the signs that were in the book. I thought, geez, I'm going to go get tested, even though I don't doctor very often. And I went over to my primary care physician at a local clinic that we have, and I said, I really need you to do a thyroid panel. I need you to do even a free T3 and a free T4. As a medicine woman, which is very different, and we're not against doctors, but we do things very differently. I didn't really need to have my blood measured or put on a range, but I thought, you know, in this instance, I can see that things are really changing with me. I knew I was under a lot of stress. I knew I was raising a child on my own, and I knew the climate was different. I was really eating quite differently than my normal plant-based diet for several years here. And my finances weren't so good, so a lot of stress in there. So a lot of cultural shock, a lot of disempowerment when you're used to having all that personal power working in the legal field. And now you're a massage therapist and you want to make recommendations to people that are not diagnosing or prescribing, but you want to kind of guide them and show them that through the herbalism and the massage therapy and the medical intuitive that I possess since a young girl, that I could give them different ways to elevate, or what I call upgrade, and regenerate their health. They weren't always met with the fondest of heart, but many times they were. And hundreds of times when people actually really listened and they let go of the resistance. They changed their diet in subtle ways. They began to get a little bit more massage and move their lymphatic system. They began to walk more. I began to notice that their body changed. I began to feel all the cysts around their clavicle, under their arms, the gristle around their hips, the gristle around various parts of their body. And I began to notice when they would use surgeries, when they would actually do better with muscular work, like massage therapy, like lymphatic drainage, like changing their diet. And I found ways to explain with them that when they were eating from the buffets and they were eating food that had a lot of glutamate, they could expect a lot of predictable swelling. They could expect their body to produce more tension and their mind to become more anxious and depressed. I broke it down and I taught 14 classes through Carleton County Community Education with stellar results. I taught courses through Whole Foods in Duluth, Minnesota, including Hemp Hooray to celebrate the Hemp Week, as well as Introduction to Raw Foods, Plant-Based Foods, and just this year in April I taught Thyroid Madness as well as raw, vegan, gluten-free cheesecake, something I really love to both make and eat. So I brought a kind of a medicine that is an almost unheard of medicine today. It combined massage therapy, deep level medical intuition, not the kind that gives you a diagnosis code, but the kind that indicates that you have stagnation or that something's not right in a certain area, the kind that uses reflexology, or the kind that uses laying on of hands, so that when you're up on the cranium doing cranial sacral type work, you're able to distinctly use your own resources, the voice that you hear inside your own head. I was taught to use that when I was a little girl in the mid-1960s. My grandmother was a follower of many different people, including Dr. Ian Stevenson, Zechariah Sitchin. And so these people were introduced to me in the mid-1960s forward. So I brought this medicine and I began to keep digging and digging about thyroid. I started learning about the associations with Marfan syndrome and why some people like myself had extremely long limbs, big hands, and were very tall. We had glimmers or aspects of fibrillin-based issues, Marfan issues. I took the passion and the professionalism that I had in the legal community of great respect in San Jose, California, of almost 18 years. And I drove that passion into my personal passion, which caused me to leave the legal field as a transition and to bring that professionalism into my work as, there's no name for it, a shaman, a medicine woman, a guide, a coach. It's something that is unique to me. And it's something that is unique to what women did hundreds of thousands of years. That's exactly what we did, is we helped people through divine guidance. And when I say divine, what I mean is not a religious or a creator-based, but what I mean by that is that everything is balanced by nature. Everything is balanced by water, air, earth, fire that you have for your digestion and your elimination. And I brought the absolute basics to people in a way they could understand it in a very concrete way and a very professional way. I ended up finding out that most of those synthetic thyroid hormones were doing more harm than good. And I found out that I could easily look at a person's tongue and see how scalloped it was. I was finding out that over 50% of people that went for a very long time with a thyroid problem, they were looking so incessantly for a way to self-medicate, to stop the constant tension and teeth grinding and teeth clenching and sweating and overeating and not sleeping. It was driving our communities into drug use. People were constantly vaping when I'd pull up at the dog park. Now, we know cannabis is a medicine. I'm not here to make anyone feel bad about using cannabis. It's a great tool. It's an apoptotic. You know, I've gone to the hemp festival in Seattle. I celebrate cannabis and hemp very much. I've taught courses on hemp at Whole Foods in Duluth, Minnesota, like I said before. However, to be hitting something all the time, to be hitting the switch all the time, to take it into psychological testing terms, is not really to live a free, liberated life. It's to live a life where you're constantly seeking to self-medicate because you can't take the pressure. For almost 15 years, July 1st this year will be 15 years since I arrived in northeast Minnesota. It wasn't the winters that caused people to go into thyroid disease. I found what it really is. I began teaching thyroid workshops. I began to see how deep the thyroid problem was in my own family. I have family members with thyroid cancer. I have a deceased family member that shot himself in the head after a thyroid cancer diagnosis long ago. My dad's brother. My grandmother has a dowager's hump before she passed away in 2010. And other family members that are younger now, because this is very many generational, have generalized anxiety disorder. My own family was sure that I was bipolar, and I'm quite sure that I fit every description of it. And you know what? It hurt. Not only did I isolate myself for far too many years, or reclused myself away from people because I just wasn't comfortable being around people, I lost precious years. In fact, sometimes I remind myself that I'm 56 next month, and what I would have done differently with those years if I wasn't staying away from people. And it wasn't all of those years, but it was a part of those years that I stayed inside, that I didn't want to go do, that I didn't want to have people over. And that's not me. I love preparing food and having people over. I realized that it was a part of why I had such circles under my eyes and why my son, by the time he started to hit puberty at age 11, developed what we call the shiners under his eyes, the dark circles. Why he got so pudgy before his hormones came in, and why his hormones coming in as a normal teenager and mine going out as a 40-something-year-old woman really hit head to head. And it cost my son a lot. It cost my son a great deal, and it cost the both of us in ways that I want to help you to avoid, prevent, or also repair, which I have to do. You see, if someone doesn't get their thyroid helped, if they go to the doctor like I did 3 times, and they get a thyroid panel done with a venous blood sample on the crook of their arm, and the doctor comes back and tells you, nope, your thyroid's in the normal range. I don't want you to hate your doctor or say you're wrong. I just want you to know one thing. I've been gathering medicine for 33 years now, and thyroid is one small part of it. Because when I worked in law and I was in college putting myself through college, I was taking physiological psychology. I was taking psychology of addiction. I took a great many philosophy courses, including at University of California, Santa Cruz. And I took courses even when I arrived up here in Minnesota. I took developmental psychology at Fond du Lac College. And I took a great many other courses and learned many, many things, including becoming a certified Kemetic yoga instructor in 2015 in Chicago. The body needs very, very basic medicine. It doesn't always, in fact, the majority of the time, it doesn't do well with drugs. It doesn't do well with a body that doesn't walk. It doesn't do well without the minerals that the body needs. And I started coming up with a way to work the order of operations. I call it that because it's like a math problem for me. And I developed a relationship with a counselor in Duluth, Minnesota, because after I arrived here and my thyroid started to tank, and I went in and I said, you know, am I bipolar? I've never had a counselor before. I'm 43 years old. I'm crying, I'm full of anxiety, I'm full of depression, I can't think straight, I can't focus. And without using drugs, with using some counseling, with getting back on what I know, because I had gotten off balance. It took me a couple years, but I got myself back. And today when people say, well, I have a bipolar diagnosis, I have really bad anxiety, I've got generalized anxiety disorder. I've worked with clients all over the world for the last nearly 15 years in Minnesota and before that in California. I've helped people with all the way from basic anxiety through panic attacks all the way to agoraphobia, because every single one of these has the same basic root cause. From 1984 forward, I started really investigating psychosomatics as I was enrolled in the college psychology, as I told you about. And I use the term interchangeably, psychosomatics or mind-body medicine. And that's because I started to realize, even if you consider for a moment that the universe may be holographic, that it may be something different than we see just in the material world, in the world of matter. I'm open to that because I love the field of physics. If that's the case, then the mind is generating so many thoughts, like Dr. John Sarno talked about, and the thoughts of tension relate to things which cause predictable oxygen and blood tensions and oxygen deprivation in the body, which produce pain. Dr. John Sarno brings up in his book, The Divided Mind, which I've loaned to many of my clients, but people don't seem to read as much anymore. So I taught the classes like the Thyroid Madness class at Whole Foods just a month or two ago, and I distilled everything down into a collection of what I'd studied and 14 and a half years of what I'd actually helped people with, what I tried that worked, how I noticed that they had thyroid problems, and how they got better, like really better. I educated people about ultrasounds on the thyroid and how they could begin to see, because people are very proof driven. In fact, since the early 1900s, people have been very, very pill driven. So they'll spend tons and tons of money going into the health food stores or the natural food stores, and you'll see entire walls full of plastic bottles full of pills and potions and crystal drinks and everything else. They'll spend tons of money to go take the red yeast rice because their cholesterol's up. You know, they'll take blood pressure medication, but they frequently won't change their diet. And even when it's beyond time to transition out of blood pressure medication, they're reluctant to do so because of the fear-mongering that's been a big part of the medical industry. And that's the piece that I'm really against. Because I'm going to be really honest with you right now. I'm honest with you all the time. What's happening in the world today, it startles me. I want you to look into my eyes. It startles me. Because as a little girl in the 1960s, and a teenager in the 1970s, and a grown woman in the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s, and an elder woman today, 56 next month, I see people that are lost. They're in pain. They're selling themselves short, hormonally deranged from eating milk, meat, and eggs that have been given lots of estrogen. I see, 2 to 3 out of 5 people with cancers, cell mutation, because they and their grandparents and their great-grandparents and their great-great-grandparents have been eating growth hormone in milk, meat, and eggs. And I go over with people in a very pleasant way, and that's where doing the regular coaching or guidance work with them, which I offer so much more than that, but it's talking about how you can transition just for you. Because with some people I work with, they say, I don't eat vegetables at all. I don't even know how to begin being plant-based. And I've been plant-based for 33 years. I've been a juicer for 33 years. I studied raw foods for reversing disease from a woman when I was about 23 years old who had completely reversed her own cancer, and it just absolutely opened my mind. I studied word sound from Rastafari elders long ago, and I learned about how our words sound power. It has everything to do with what you're attracting and the vibration that you carry. I became an herbalist, a yoga instructor, a massage therapist, and my grandmother taught me a great deal about intuition that I don't see anybody practicing today. Now, the first inclination that we have is, well, you're not better, and I'm not saying that I'm better. I'm saying that I'm an elder with a very unique form of medicine. I don't even feel comfortable using a name anymore. I didn't take a 1 or 2 year shamanic practitioner course. I gathered and gathered and gathered, beginning as a little girl, animal communicator. Animals all communicate. They know when you're coming home without you calling them on the phone and telling them, and they're waiting at the door for you, not just because you come home at the same time every night. Because they sense inside what I call the field. Something that's absolutely proven in physics is that there is an energy field outside of all of us. Something that when I took a course from HeartMath in Boulder Creek, California, the area where I'm from near Santa Cruz, California, there's a coherent heart field around each one of us. And without someone saying anything, if you walk into a room, like I did with a practitioner today, to go get an adjustment, and you walk in and you go to get this and the person is not in a good mood, the energy is really in more of a negative space, the person doesn't have to say anything, you can just feel it. Throughout my 14 plus years in Northeast Minnesota, I rent space in a physical space, and right now I've cut it back to 3 days a week, and I work with people virtually, so Skype, FaceTime, on the phone, whatever works. And we meet face to face, And I'm able to put so many of these medicine bag tools to work for you so that you're able to get off of substance abuse, thyroid issues, PCOS, cancer coaching. This is something that just is not being offered. And my courses are going to be able to train more people, especially my foundational Crucial Keys to Unlocking Disease Mind-Body course. My thyroid course that unlocks the basic aspects of why so many people on the mind-body level, because there's many different aspects to it, are coming down with thyroid disease. My thoughts are, when I said that sometimes I really struggle with what's going on in the world today when I look around me and I see hormonal derangement, people that we love, but people that have had 4, 5, 6 generations of eating lots and lots and lots of female estrogen and growth hormone in animals that were used to quickly make them grow, to make sure that they did not get sick, so lots of antibiotic use. Now we're becoming hardened toward each other. We're beginning to see the finest elements of utilitarianism, where we start to treat each other like utility. What's in it for me only? I want to grow a collective consciousness. I want my medicine to be out in the world again, the medicine of the elders, the true medicine. I'd like to work in partnership with Western doctors because they have tools that I don't have. But you see, long ago we scanned the body using this. My hand is a sensor. My fingernails are solar panels. And in the course that I'm completing right now called Becoming the Modern Day Natural Goddess, I want women to be able to see that they can come into a place of comfort with their own body, mind, and spirit. That they can learn the ways of the elders again, even when they don't have mothers and grandmothers around, because through patriarchy we've been diminished. I don't want to be a feminist. I want to be a partnership-based who loves all people, of all orientations, of all hues, of all gender, all persuasion. I want to build the house of the future together. Thank you for joining me.